The small town of Cortland, New York, had lived with an uneasy shadow for nearly a decade, a quiet ache no one could fully name. In March of 2004, 14-year-old Veronica Hayes, a bright and energetic high school freshman with an infectious laugh and a love for sketching, vanished while walking home from her school library. Her disappearance was sudden and inexplicable, leaving her family in a state of shock and confusion. Veronica's parents, Richard and Linda Hayes, recalled that day in vivid detail. The cool spring air, the hum of cars on Main Street, and the way their daughter had waved goodbye with her sketchbook clutched tightly under her arm. The town rallied immediately, organizing searches, distributing flyers, and setting up neighborhood patrols. But as hours turned into days and then weeks, the hope that Veronica would be found alive began to wane. The initial investigation involved local police, state troopers, and even the FBI, who brought in specialized units to comb through every possible lead. Yet despite tireless efforts, no concrete evidence emerged, and the trail eventually went cold. For the Hayes family, the uncertainty was unbearable. Linda would often sit in Veronica's room, surrounded by sketches and journals, replaying memories and imagining scenarios, each thought a mix of fear and longing. Richard threw himself into work, but was constantly drawn back to the haunting question of what had happened to his daughter. Friends and neighbors tried to provide support, but the unrelenting passage of time and lack of answers created a sense of isolation. Investigators, meanwhile, faced the reality that many tips were either mistaken or unhelpful, leaving them to navigate the frustrating challenge of piecing together a puzzle, with nearly all its pieces missing. Behavioral analysts who consulted on the case theorized that the abduction was likely planned, taking advantage of moments when Veronica would be vulnerable, yet visible enough that witnesses would struggle to place details accurately. The analysis suggested a perpetrator who had observed the town's routines and understood how to exploit gaps in supervision. Years passed, and the case became a somber fixture in the community's collective memory. Veronica's disappearance influenced how parents watched their children, how schools implemented security measures, and how local law enforcement approached unsolved cases. Cold cases like hers, while deeply personal, also carry lessons about human behavior, the limits of memory, and the ways trauma reverberates across generations. Psychologists often point out that unresolved crimes of this nature create what is sometimes called ambiguous loss, a form of grief where closure is absent, leaving families in a perpetual state of suspense. The Hayes family, despite counseling and community support, lived with this form of grief daily. They celebrated milestones, birthdays, school achievements, holidays, yet each event was tinged with the painful awareness that Veronica was missing. In 2022, nearly 18 years after the disappearance, new possibilities emerged. Forensic laboratories had developed advanced DNA analysis techniques, and genealogy databases had grown exponentially, providing unprecedented tools for solving cold cases. Detectives revisited the Veronica Hayes file with renewed determination. They meticulously reviewed evidence that had been collected in 2004, including a partial DNA sample found near the location where she was last seen. Previously, the sample had been too degraded or incomplete to yield meaningful results, but with current methods, genetic markers could be extracted, amplified, and compared to extensive genealogical databases. The process was painstaking. Analysts had to account for contamination, degradation, and the fact that the original evidence had been stored for nearly 2 decades. Each step was documented, reviewed, and confirmed by multiple independent experts to ensure reliability. The breakthrough came when the partial DNA matched several distant relatives in a public genealogy database. Detectives constructed a family tree, carefully analyzing connections and narrowing the pool of potential suspects. Psychological profiling played a crucial role at this stage, as behavioral experts evaluated lifestyle patterns, social networks, and personal histories to determine which individuals within the extended family might fit the profile of someone capable of abducting and harming a child. The suspect emerged as a figure who had long been overlooked, a man in his late 30s who had lived quietly within the town and maintained a seemingly ordinary life. Neighbors remembered him as polite, reserved, and unremarkable, but when investigators delved into his past, inconsistencies and troubling behaviors surfaced. Instances of voyeurism, threats reported during altercations, and a history of minor legal infractions. The team moved carefully, knowing that any misstep could compromise the case. Surveillance, interviews, and background checks confirmed suspicions while minimizing the risk of tipping off the suspect. Each action was guided not only by investigative protocol, but also by an understanding of human psychology, how individuals respond to pressure, conceal guilt, and interact with others when aware that scrutiny is increasing. Detectives knew that the suspect's outward demeanor could be misleading, masking inner patterns of manipulation and control. Community engagement was also considered. Officers coordinated with local leaders to maintain calm, emphasizing that while the investigation was ongoing, the town remained safe, and that all citizens' cooperation was appreciated. The arrest itself was executed with precision. Officers approached the suspect in the early morning hours, carefully monitoring his reactions and ensuring that the process was both safe and effective. Upon learning of his detention, the man initially denied involvement, maintaining a calm exterior that belied the gravity of the situation. However, forensic evidence, combined with genealogical data, eyewitness accounts, and behavioral analysis, formed an irrefutable chain linking him to the crime. Once confronted with this evidence, his composure began to fracture. Investigators noted the psychological progression from denial to subtle signs of stress, micro-expressions, changes in tone, and physical agitation, indicating both awareness of the evidence and the realization that his efforts to remain undetected had failed. For the Hayes family, the news of the arrest was both shocking and profoundly emotional. Richard and Linda experienced a surge of relief, validation, and sorrow all at once. The realization that the perpetrator had been living among them, unnoticed for nearly 2 decades, stirred anger and grief, but it also confirmed that the long years of uncertainty were finally coming to an end. Community members expressed a mixture of astonishment and empathy, recognizing the enduring emotional toll that such a prolonged investigation can inflict on families and neighbors alike. Local mental health professionals emphasized that while closure would not erase trauma, it could provide a framework for understanding, healing, and reestablishing a sense of safety. As legal proceedings moved forward, the case became a study in the interplay between technology, persistence, and human behavior. Prosecutors emphasized not just the forensic breakthroughs, but also the meticulous investigative work, the consideration of psychological patterns, and the careful reconstruction of events. The jury was presented with a comprehensive narrative that integrated the science of DNA, the insights of behavioral analysis, and the emotional realities of the victim's family. Expert witnesses explained the evolution of DNA techniques, how genealogical data can illuminate hidden connections, and why the suspect's behavior had allowed him to evade detection for so long. The case demonstrated the importance of patience, interdisciplinary collaboration, and the application of both scientific and psychological expertise in solving cold cases that have lingered unresolved for decades. As spring turned into summer in 2022, the Hayes family struggled with a swirl of emotions. After so many years of uncertainty, the arrest of the suspect, someone they had unknowingly passed on the street countless times, felt surreal. While relief began to seep in, it was accompanied by a haunting realization. Their daughter's life had been irrevocably changed, and the emotional scar would linger forever. The community, too, experienced a renewed sense of vulnerability, reflecting on the illusion of safety that had masked such a dark secret for nearly 2 decades. Counseling services reported an increase in calls from parents and young adults alike, all grappling with the knowledge that a predator had operated undetected in their midst. Experts in human behavior pointed out that long-term exposure to unresolved trauma often fosters heightened vigilance and anxiety, a pattern that had subtly shaped the lives of those in Cortland since Veronica's disappearance. Investigators, however, pressed forward with renewed energy. The arrest was only the beginning. Building a comprehensive case required painstaking effort. Every interview, every forensic sample, and every digital footprint had to be meticulously documented. The suspect's life was examined in detail, his movements, communications, and relationships scrutinized for patterns that could reveal both the crime's circumstances and his psychological profile. Behavioral analysts contributed insight into the mind of someone capable of abducting a child in a quiet town, detailing how routine observation, manipulation of social perceptions, and careful concealment of deviant behaviors can allow a predator to blend seamlessly into ordinary life. These profiles were essential in guiding interrogations, anticipating lies, and identifying inconsistencies that might otherwise be overlooked. During this phase, the Hayes family was drawn into the process, not as investigators, but as central witnesses whose memories, intuition, and observations were invaluable. Linda Hayes recounted the smallest details of Veronica's routines, the way she would linger in the library stacks, her favorite shortcuts home, and the moments she had deviated from familiar paths. Richard recalled seemingly trivial encounters with neighbors and acquaintances that, in retrospect, carried subtle clues about the suspect's movements. These recollections, when combined with physical evidence, began to reconstruct a timeline of the night Veronica vanished, illuminating how carefully the abductor had orchestrated her disappearance. Each day brought incremental progress, each discovery a mixture of validation and renewed sorrow, as the reality of what had happened became increasingly clear. The psychological impact of long-term uncertainty on the Hayes family was profound. Experts noted that unresolved loss creates a chronic stress response, heightening sensitivity to new information, while also making it difficult to process trauma effectively. Linda described nights filled with vivid dreams, memories interwoven with imagined scenarios, while Richard struggled with guilt over perceived failures to protect his child. Counseling sessions focused on resilience and coping mechanisms, emphasizing that the arrest, while monumental, could not erase the past, but could serve as a foundation for rebuilding a sense of agency and closure. The community also participated in collective therapy of sorts, with neighborhood meetings and support groups providing spaces to discuss lingering fears, share stories, and understand the complexities of prolonged grief. Meanwhile, investigators worked closely with forensic teams to analyze the suspect's past interactions, seeking corroboration for the DNA and genealogical evidence. Old-school records, employment histories, and neighborhood accounts revealed subtle signs of antisocial behavior, minor thefts, unexplained absences, and instances of intimidation or threats that had gone unreported or unconnected at the time. These details, while not criminal in isolation, painted a consistent picture of someone capable of predatory conduct, confirming behavioral analysts' profiles. Law enforcement officers explained that understanding a suspect's psychology often provides as much value as physical evidence, particularly in cases where the perpetrator has carefully avoided detection. The combination of forensic science and psychological insight proved crucial in building a case that would withstand legal scrutiny. The interrogation process was equally revealing. The suspect, when confronted with genealogical links and corroborating evidence, initially denied any involvement, maintaining a calm exterior. Investigators employed techniques informed by human behavioral science, recognizing that sustained pressure, strategic questioning, and presentation of incontrovertible facts can disrupt patterns of deception. Subtle behavioral cues, Changes in eye contact, microexpressions, shifts in posture provided investigators with insight into the suspect's internal state. Over time, cracks appeared in his narrative. Contradictions emerged, memories faltered, and a psychological unraveling began. It was a slow, deliberate process, guided by both law enforcement expertise and an understanding of how guilt, fear, and stress manifest in human behavior. Community reaction to these developments was intense. Cortland's residents oscillated between disbelief and cautious relief. The revelation that someone who had seemed so ordinary could commit such a calculated and cruel act sparked discussions about trust, perception, and vigilance. Local schools implemented new safety measures, emphasizing awareness without fostering paranoia, and public forums addressed the emotional needs of families affected by the case. Psychologists noted that communities recovering from long unsolved crimes often experience collective trauma, where even those not directly impacted internalize the stress and uncertainty. The Hayes family, while at the center of attention, became advocates for child safety and public awareness, speaking at local events and sharing their experience to prevent similar tragedies. Legal proceedings advanced steadily. Prosecutors presented the case with meticulous attention to detail, weaving together forensic evidence, genealogical analysis, witness testimony, and behavioral insight to construct an unassailable narrative. The court was shown the evolution of forensic science, highlighting how techniques unavailable in 2004 had now enabled investigators to definitively connect the suspect to the crime. Experts testified about the reliability of DNA analysis, the statistical probability of genealogical matches, and the methods used to reconstruct timelines and identify patterns of behavior. The defense attempted to question the integrity of long-stored evidence and the use of genealogy, but the prosecution countered with thorough documentation, expert testimony, and adherence to procedural rigor. For the Hayes family, the courtroom experience was emotionally charged. Each testimony, while validating, reopened old wounds. Details of Veronica's last known movements, her dreams and personality, and the calculated nature of her abduction were recounted with precision, blending sorrow and scientific clarity. Linda described the sensation as simultaneously painful and necessary, a way to honor Veronica's memory while confronting the reality of the person responsible. Richard found a sense of purpose in supporting the investigation, ensuring that every factual detail was considered and every emotional nuance was acknowledged. Outside the courtroom, community members followed the proceedings closely, drawn by a mix of empathy, curiosity, and a desire for justice long delayed. The arrest and subsequent trial underscored the intricate relationship between human behavior and the criminal justice system. The suspect's ability to conceal his actions for nearly 18 years highlighted patterns of deception, manipulation, and social camouflage that behavioral analysts frequently encounter in cases of long-term predatory conduct. Investigators emphasized the importance of persistence, patience, and interdisciplinary collaboration, noting that cases like Veronica Hayes's could not have been resolved through forensic evidence alone. The integration of psychological insight, community input, genealogical research, and advanced DNA techniques created a holistic approach that proved decisive in achieving justice. The final stages of the investigation brought a mixture of anticipation, dread, and cautious hope to the Hayes family and the entire Cortland community. As trial preparations moved forward, the reality of the suspect's long-hidden actions became impossible to ignore. The prosecution meticulously presented the evidence collected over 18 years, combining old case files with modern forensic breakthroughs and connecting them through a timeline that left little room for doubt. Each photograph, each DNA sample, and each genealogical lead formed pieces of a puzzle that revealed the calculated and methodical nature of the crime. Observers were struck not only by the technological precision, but also by the chilling psychology at play. How a predator had manipulated appearances, avoided detection, and ingrained himself into the community without raising suspicion. Courtroom sessions were intense and emotional. Witnesses recounted long-forgotten memories, family members spoke of the years of uncertainty and grief, and forensic experts described the technical breakthroughs that had made the arrest possible. Veronica's mother, Linda, provided testimony that blended personal recollection with a compelling narrative of enduring love and vigilance. She described the small details that no one else might have remembered, the way Veronica would hum while organizing her school projects, the laughter she carried into the kitchen, and the sudden changes in her routine that had seemed insignificant at the time but, in retrospect, were part of the last hours of her life. Richard Hayes shared his own perspective, highlighting the community's role in the search, the subtle signs that had been overlooked, and the enduring hope that the truth would eventually emerge. Their testimony resonated deeply, emphasizing the human cost of long unsolved crimes and reinforcing the stakes of the legal proceedings. The suspect's defense tried to introduce doubt, questioning the reliability of decades-old evidence and the legitimacy of genealogical methods. However, the prosecution demonstrated how modern forensic science, combined with meticulous record-keeping and behavioral profiling, created a robust case. Expert witnesses explained the science of DNA inheritance, the statistical improbability of coincidental matches, and the rigor of modern laboratory standards. Behavioral analysts elaborated on patterns of manipulation, social deception, and the ability of offenders to appear ordinary while committing extraordinary acts of cruelty. These insights painted a stark picture of the suspect's character, demonstrating a long history of premeditation and concealment that aligned with the evidence in ways that the defense could not plausibly dispute. Outside the courtroom, the town of Cortland felt a mixture of relief and residual shock. Residents reflected on how easily appearances could mask danger and how critical vigilance and community engagement are in ensuring safety. Parents became more attentive to children's routines, neighbors reconnected, and local organizations hosted workshops on recognizing signs of predatory behavior. Psychologists noted that such communal recovery processes were essential in helping townsfolk heal after prolonged periods of unresolved trauma. The Hayes family, while still grappling with personal grief, embraced a role as advocates for awareness, speaking at schools and local events about the importance of reporting suspicious behavior and supporting forensic advancements in solving cold cases. The trial progressed steadily, with the prosecution methodically building a timeline of the night Veronica disappeared. Surveillance footage from 2004, once considered outdated and inconclusive, was re-examined with modern enhancement technology. Minor discrepancies in the suspect's previous statements were highlighted, and behavioral analysis provided context for inconsistencies, demonstrating deliberate deception. Every piece of evidence reinforced the notion that the crime had been calculated, with the perpetrator exploiting weaknesses in community trust, procedural limitations of the time, and his ability to appear harmless. The jury, guided through this intricate web of facts, timelines, and expert testimony, slowly began to comprehend both the human and technical dimensions of the case. As closing arguments approached, the prosecution focused on the human story behind the statistics, forensics, and profiles. They emphasized that Veronica Hayes was not a case number or a headline but a vibrant young girl whose life was cut short. They recounted her passions, routines, and interactions with family and friends, underscoring the profound loss caused by the suspect's actions. Jurors were reminded that the forensic breakthroughs and genealogical matches were tools to restore justice that had been delayed for nearly 2 decades. The narrative blended scientific precision with emotional resonance, capturing the interplay between human psychology, investigative diligence, and community impact. The jury's deliberation, though tense, reflected the overwhelming weight of evidence. After several hours, the verdict was delivered, guilty on all counts. A hush fell over the courtroom, followed by a mixture of tears, relief, and a sense of closure. The Hayes family, though still grieving, expressed gratitude that the legal system had recognized the truth and held the suspect accountable. Community members echoed similar sentiments, acknowledging that justice, though delayed, had been achieved. Behavioral experts noted that delayed justice can have complex effects. While closure is reached, long-term psychological processing continues, and communities must actively engage in healing. In the aftermath of the trial, attention shifted to understanding the broader implications of the case. Law enforcement agencies across the state highlighted the importance of maintaining detailed records, preserving biological samples, and embracing technological advancements in forensic science. The success of genealogical DNA methods demonstrated a powerful new tool in solving cold cases, inspiring other jurisdictions to re-examine unresolved investigations. Meanwhile, psychologists and counselors emphasize the significance of community support, long-term counseling, and public education in mitigating the psychological impact of violent crimes. The Hayes family's willingness to share their story became a catalyst for awareness campaigns, workshops, and public safety initiatives, ensuring that Veronica's memory would continue to contribute to the protection of other children. For the Hayes family, the sense of closure was nuanced. They were grateful that the perpetrator was finally held accountable, yet they were acutely aware that no verdict could erase the years of fear, uncertainty, and grief. Linda described her feelings as a mixture of relief, sorrow, and cautious hope, recognizing that the emotional journey was far from over. Richard focused on advocacy, ensuring that the lessons learned from this case were disseminated throughout the community, and that the tools and insights developed through the investigation were applied to prevent future tragedies. Their story became emblematic of resilience, persistence, and the intersection of human psychology, forensic science, and community solidarity. As months passed, the town of Cortland gradually resumed a sense of normalcy. Neighborhoods were safer, community programs were strengthened, and families remained vigilant but less fearful. Veronica Hayes' story was commemorated through local initiatives focused on child safety and education, and her memory became a symbol of justice achieved through persistence, science, and human determination. Investigators reflected on the complexities of the case, recognizing that the combination of forensic breakthroughs, genealogical methods, and psychological profiling had been essential in solving a crime that might otherwise have remained an unresolved tragedy. The case of Veronica Hayes illustrates the profound power of combining modern science with human insight. It underscores how perpetrators can hide in plain sight, how families endure prolonged uncertainty, and how communities can recover through awareness, advocacy, and collective healing. The arrest and conviction, while not erasing the past, provided a framework for understanding, closure, and resilience. Behavioral experts highlighted that cases like this teach invaluable lessons about human psychology, the nature of deception, and the critical importance of patience, diligence, and compassion in pursuing justice. Veronica's story, once a painful mystery, became a testament to the triumph of truth over concealment, reminding all who knew it that justice, even delayed, can restore balance and hope. The Hayes family, while forever changed by the events of 2004, emerged as pillars of awareness and advocacy. They spoke openly about the impact of trauma, the significance of forensic innovation, and the critical role of community vigilance. Their narrative, intertwined with advancements in DNA technology and psychological profiling, became a blueprint for solving cold cases nationwide. Each discussion, public engagement, and educational effort extended the reach of Veronica's legacy, ensuring that her story contributed to the prevention of future tragedies. In the final analysis, the case reinforced the enduring principle that time does not diminish the importance of truth. Every lead, every memory, and every technological breakthrough has the potential to unravel the most carefully concealed crimes. The conviction of the suspect demonstrated that persistence, expertise, and a commitment to justice could overcome decades of uncertainty. For the Hayes family, and for Cortland as a whole, the resolution of this cold case represented not only accountability, but a reaffirmation of hope, resilience, and the enduring human capacity to confront and overcome even the darkest chapters of life.